So, Jake, I know I've told you this before, maybe just recently, but one of the reasons that I was interested in doing this podcast with you is because I found that I didn't have a forum to just bumble around and figure things out in a way that was intentional. You know what I mean? Like bumbling around intentionally, like I'm going to go to the gym and try and work out, but I've never worked out before. So I'm just using the machines wrong and everything. But you know what? I know I'm there to learn and it's okay. Nobody minds versus, no, this is a terrible analogy.
So no, no, it's not a terrible analogy. I'm just wondering why we did it on a podcast. Like, you could have just called.
This is a podcast where two old friends, both Canadian, one black and one white, and both men, explore what it looks like to adopt the mindset of an inclusive society. Instead of asking, how do we get there, Jake and Chris discuss, what does it look like to act as if we're already there? Welcome to the Disorienting Dilemma.
Like, we could have just talked. That's like
we could have. But then I thought, give me a bumble around conversation where people are not highly informed or driving towards a point where they're literally figuring things out. And then then I realized it was the disorienting dilemma, and I needed, as part of the process, to have some rational discourse. So I thought vicariously maybe some other people would do it or be interested in it. Yeah. Anyways.
But I'm not just your black friend, though.
No.
Okay, just making sure.
No, you're not just my black friend.
Well, because I also wanted to come in, and I mean, I think this is about power sharing. Why do I do this? Like, why do I want to come and do this? And yeah. I also like having these conversations. I often go away thinking and really processing our conversations. They move me as well.
Right.
And so I really enjoy it. I hope other people do, but I really do.
So cringeworthy moments, like the one that brought me to this, there are things out of my personal life or my lived experience and yours as well that we bring into the show. So it typically isn't like today's topic is going to be geopolitical culturalism or hegemony or whatever. Yeah, exactly. We're okay with bringing up those terms, but we're not going to, we're not doing a class here.
Right.
So recently we've been hiring more people for the team, which is great. We're growing up. We're expanding, and we were looking for some individuals, and we had in mind the level and the kind of experience and whatnot. And we found ourselves saying no to some folks who, on the face of it, may have been completely qualified or qualified in key areas, but not the only factor. And I want to be clear about this, but one of the factors in them not making the final cut or the final review is that their lived experience didn't have a perspective or a point of view that we needed. The problem is that came across as we want somebody a different shade of color than you. And that created a whole thing.
Like, white need not apply?
White need not apply.
Is that kind of where this was?
That's what it felt like, but that's not what we were saying. And that's actually not even true. That the people getting these roles could be white. But if they would have to be able to demonstrate a point of view that captured a non-white perspective.
Okay.
So I thought today we could talk a little bit about how this comes across, because forever we both know the white community has looked at anybody in the black community who says, you know what, I didn't get that job because I'm black. And we would say, no, you didn't get that job because you weren't qualified, man. Now, we, meaning that that would be a typical response. Just try harder. And this is based on this idea of a meritocracy.
Right.
Work hard enough, you can get it. Which we're saying on this show isn't true.
But what if that was the experience of the person, right? Because that's what it felt. So that's an interesting one, right? So when you said, a person would say, I didn't get this job because I'm black, and then the response would be, no, it's because you didn't qualify.
Yeah.
What if my experience was, what if everything about my experience was that felt true?
What do you mean?
Like, I wonder, like, I've had that feeling before. So I've kind of lived on both sides of this kind of conversation. In the job that I am currently in, on my very first day when I showed up, I was told by a person who I later learned also applied for the job as an internal candidate and said, "Oh, well, you got the job. Now I know why. The only reason you got the job and I didn't is because you're black." Like first day one, a couple hours into it. So I've had the experience where people thought that, I was just gifted this thing because of the color. But then I've certainly left processes wondering, I think it's probably because feedback hasn't been always clear. So then my lived experience fills in the gaps. I wonder if I didn't get that job because of this. Like I've felt that several times. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes it's because things are vague that you just don't know. So you fill it in for the things that you do know. We lean heavy on our experience. And then for someone else to say, "Come on, that's not it. It's just because you're not qualified." I'm like, well, you don't know that.
Yeah.
Because I don't even know that.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not confident that that's why yet.
Exactly. So in response, we wrote an email. Our CEO wrote an email, but it's meant to say to anyone, look, when we're hiring, just so you can see what our thinking is, we want to be completely transparent. You're going to be able to see that on the Realize Worth blog. What I wanted to talk about is how the systemic racism in the West has a very clever response. When a black person or person of color does not get a job, we can say, you did not merit the job. And when a black person does get a job, or a person of color, or even a woman in many cases, we would say, "Oh, you got it because we needed someone like you just to round out the edges a little bit. So you didn't deserve it."
Tokenism.
You got it because you're a token. We know it. You know it. That's why you get the job. So in either case, a person of color, and in many cases, women for certain senior positions within the private sector, you can't win. It's like, if you get it, it's because of this. And if you didn't get it, you didn't try hard enough.
But I had a couple questions as you're talking about, because it's interesting to me. You talked about being transparent. So you're writing a blog. You want everyone, whoever comes to the company, to know right up front, here's what we believe, here's where we stand, right?
That's what Angela Parker is the CEO. Yes, and that's what she wanted. She wanted to be very forthright.
I'm trying to go back and think of experiences as to when maybe the commitment is all the way through a process, but I think at different entry points, is it diversity, inclusion, and equity considerations at the job posting? So do you restrict the posting to say, this is who we're looking for, the type of candidate, others need not apply? That'd be kind of one way. I wonder, is it you throw it out there in the job posting in some vague ways, you put your principles out there, but then at the selection of the candidate, we say, here's who we're looking for? Or do you just kind of go with, we're looking for the best qualified person, and then we'll get to the heart of it at the interview process? But by that phase, I wonder if it's not clear up front, if it makes it harder because you build in the expectations along the way. And then you have to tell someone one of the reasons why you didn't get it was because we have this commitment to righting historic wrongs, right? These are historically marginalized and underrepresented groups in our industry, and this is our commitment. But I wonder if you just said it sooner, if you just made that decision right up front, as hard as that would be, what would that make a difference?
Yeah, and I don't even know if that's appropriate, right? Like, because that's not exactly what we're saying either, because I think we would be fine with a white person in the job.
Right.
If we had someone from a UN Council on women equity issues and crisis with a global perspective, and they were white as the driven snow, if you were that white, we would hire you, because you'd be able to reflect that point of view, even if it wasn't your personal lived experience. Because let's be honest, we're not going to hire a black person, for example, or a brown person who represents the lived experience of all brown people around the world. That is a weird kind of tokenism. That is not what we're doing. We just needed somebody who could speak to it in a way that felt authentic.
So in the ways that I do it, and I wonder, did the color of my skin, I wonder if fragility starts to fill that space in for people who aren't often turned down. So if you're not usually in that space, that's probably, you're occupying a space that I've never been here before.
Yeah.
I've never ever had to. It's a weird privilege. I mean, we've talked about privilege before, but suddenly,
Yes,
suddenly, what makes it disorienting is I don't know why I've not been selected.
Yeah.
I think it's this.
But privilege can't work against me. That's too disorienting.
Right.
I tell you what, I found myself thinking this through. I did not say it in the group. We were walking around and I was with some women and we're talking, and they would make a point. I didn't exactly agree to the point, or I had something to add, and I found myself not saying something because I'm thinking they don't need to know. I mean, we're not making a decision about purchasing something or doing something together that needs to be informed. They're just talking about their point of view. Why do I feel like I need to add something to kind of round it out or guide it? Am I wanting to add my point of view because I think it's required? Like they need it because I'm a man, and that's the model that I've sort of subconsciously pulled in.
So it was that they need your perspective.
Well, I'm wondering, did I just want to freely be a part of the conversation, or am I thinking I have a role and I'm going to help them because they're missing an angle and I'm a man. So.
You're going to mansplain it?
Well, okay. It didn't feel like I was restating exactly what they said. I felt like it was adding a nuance, but my nuance was also quite contradictory and definitely reflected my lived experience as a man. So to the audience out there, through this podcast counseling session with Jake, I said nothing. And I just thought about, why was it important for me to say it? Was it going to actually contribute anything that was absolutely critical? No. So I chose to go a different way.
You know, when I'm thinking about tokenism and people of color, like when I get a job or when I'm applying and I get this sense that there is in the background a real commitment to hiring and having a diverse workforce and being inclusive, there's a part of me that wonders about that stereotype, that guy in the corner who's kind of saying, and maybe that person doesn't exist, but I wonder in my head that person exists somewhere in the organization saying, he just took our job.
Yeah.
And if I get it, then I'm taking a job that someone either had to be very magnanimous and generous in making room for me to have it and to be able to get here, that I would not have been able to get here on my own. There is some truth to employment allyship, I think.
Mm-hmm.
If we find ways and we're talking about removing barriers and we're actually being anti-racist in our work, then there is a commitment to do that. There is a sustained commitment to constantly saying, are we okay here? Should we be making room? Should we be removing barriers? But sometimes I wonder if it's one of those situations, and I never really know. Is it all things considered equal and then a commitment to diversity and inclusion? Like, is that how? Like, did you look and say, no, we're not going to hire a pilot who's never, ever taken a flight course in their life?
Yeah.
Or do you say, no, I'm going to hire this pilot. I think she's amazing because she's Black.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Is it all things considered equal? And then what's the right way?
Yeah. I don't, and then when I think, okay, I've got it figured out, then I think I may be telling myself what I need to hear, because I've done that my whole life. You know, my own internal narrative, I'm the hero in it. And so there's a bias towards rationalizing your choices and your decision and your value and why others aren't as right or correct until they agree with you. So then I think, you know, you get to the point where you feel somewhat immobilized, like me with that conversation the other day, not saying anything. Did I not say anything as, oh, I'm becoming aware and I'm understanding how to interact as a peer, and I'm being anti-gender bias, not just I'm not going to participate. Or was it a lack of courage, so I'm just going to withdraw? Or, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this situation is the same thing. It'd be very hard to know objectively all of what's going on in everybody's head.
Oh, for sure. I wonder sometimes, though, we think the only way we participate is by speaking, and it is important to find those safe spaces where you have voice and where your lived experience matters.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I think we just pause for a beat. There's lots of room to participate through listening and hearing and just slowly checking in, because I think as men, we can take that extra second to be quiet because most of the world listens when we speak anyway. So maybe there is space to say, well, I really want to be heard. Maybe that's the lesson. We're building up a bit of self-discipline.
Yeah.
Instead of just elbows in, well, time to hear from me now in my perspective.
Yeah.
If this is actually about having equitable conversations, someone has to make room for less voices that are heard less often, less frequently. And that means we give it up. And so I think there is a natural tension for us to feel in those situations. I want to share my space. Maybe I should listen a little bit longer. I mean, I think that's part of our commitment to be good allies and to make sure we're hearing from folks and holding and protecting space for people to be heard. That's the new role. That is the new role.
Yeah, that's right. And when you're in the CEO role of an organization, you've got to think organizationally about holding that space too.
I think that's
everybody's benefit. Yeah.
And that's hard because it's hard personally, but we have a different role to play now, and different role, different responsibility. They flow out of that commitment to be anti-racist or to work against some of these systemic isms that people are up against. I mean, I don't know how they get dismantled without hard, awkward, uncomfortable work.
Yeah.
Like you're talking about.
And it's ingrained in our society at a macro meta level. I mean, we talk about a meritocracy, which is compounded with this idea of American exceptionalism. People who have privilege and standing, the white Christian male, is at the top of the pecking order. Structurally, that is baked into our psyche so hard that it's really hard to think about holding space for the unrepresented voice as having the appropriate merit for the job. Like conceptually, I can see why you want to do that, but they don't really deserve the job. That's where you even come to in the end with what I can see people reacting to what we just said about, the CEO's job is to hold the space for the unrepresented point of view or voice so that our organization can be healthier and stronger. But couldn't you still get to the place? Yeah, so you just proved my point. They just got it because of the color of the skin. If they were really good, they would have had the job a long time ago on their merits.
Well, it's interesting as you're talking about, how the West was won, as it were.
Yeah.
I think about the myth that is, if you just work hard enough, you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That everyone has, that all men are created equal.
Yeah.
That kind of idea.
Yeah.
Which conceptually is great and beautiful. It just doesn't bear out in reality.
No.
Once we start thinking that we are powerful, and there is something that to your point about the psyche of a nation that starts to believe we're better, we've conquered, we've come a long way. There is a subtle switch to say this is what we deserve. We deserve these jobs.
Yeah. And
that's where that privilege starts to build in. And I wonder how often that trickles down to, you know what, I've worked hard, I've gone to the right school, I've invested enough, I deserve this. This job is mine.
Yes.
And then people get so angry when it looks like other people have taken a path that wasn't exactly like theirs.
Yes.
Because we tie privilege, we think that privilege means affluent and easy. And so the pushback is, my life hasn't been easy. I don't have a lot of money. My life has been hard.
Right.
Of course, but that's not what we mean by privilege.
Right. Right. And so for everybody on the show, let's unpack the word privilege one more time here.
Privilege is that thing you never ever have to think about. Like the privilege is, and I get you won't see it. You don't know what you don't know. The fact that you don't know it is the privilege. Your life has not been made harder in ways based on your identity.
Yeah.
So you never ever have to think about it.
And I sat through a presentation that you gave early on, and it was so helpful. You said it's privilege if you never have to think about it. Yeah. And because you were talking about, have you ever had to think about where you can take a vacation with your partner or spouse? Are you going to get beat up if you kiss them in public or hold their hands?
Right.
Do you ever think about that? No? Okay, so that's privilege. And those who are sitting there were going, well, it's straight, but I see. Straight people have privilege.
Hetero privilege.
Yeah. And then you tell a really interesting story about going to a mall. I don't think we've shared that on any podcasts. And your grandmother, I don't know if you want to tell this story, but
just constantly asking us to take hands out of our pockets and that
yes.
way.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just how it was. You don't go into a space and put your hands in your pockets because they will think you're stealing.
Okay,
and
so you're
who knows
you're
I'm
11
5,
or
I'm
whatever,
6,
right?
Or whoever. I'm much younger. This is when we're going in, and I realize at that point, it's probably protective for her too. I mean, she was taking us into department stores.
Yeah.
I now know that how awkward that would be if it looked like your kid was stealing, and how complicated that would be an interaction. She just didn't want trouble. Didn't want trouble. I want to get into the store.
Take your hands out of your pocket. Jake, take your hands out of your pocket.
Whenever you're in a store, you keep your hands out of the pocket because they will think you're stealing.
Yeah.
I'm into my 40s now, and I still think about this every single time I go into the store, and I keep my hands out of my pocket. I have caught myself going, what are you doing? Put your hands back in your pocket. I wish a would come up and say something.
put the hoodie hat up and just,
you know what? I don't. And then it brings out a different piece because I get angry.
Yeah.
I get angry that I've been conditioned that way. I think she's trying to tell me how to navigate the world.
Yeah.
Out of a space of love and concern.
Wisdom.
Her lived experience.
Yep.
When you go into a store, take your hands out of your pocket.
So for our company growing, we want your grandmother on the team. We want your grandmother who can say, hey, when we're in this situation, I don't know what take your hands out of your pocket would be, but either to help us understand when we're working with a group, interacting with a topic, or just to have that kind of insight. Because I remember when you told that story and you told it so well, like, Jake, take your hands out of your pocket. Okay, Jake, take your hands out. And then you get a little older. Grandma, why do I always have to take my hands out of my pocket? Because if you don't, they might think you're stealing. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. And even then, you're too little. You're like, I don't know who they are. I don't know what I'm stealing, but that's fine. And then later, you're still doing it out of habit. And I've never thought about it, not once in my life. Not even, I could not have in my wildest dreams come up with a story like that. That's privilege.
Yeah. So interesting when you say, we would want your grandmother on the team. You can't have everyone on your team. No, but like...
No, you can't have it. Yeah, exactly.
So,
not every point of view. Yeah.
So what do you do then?
Yeah.
Like, how do you solve for that? Is there sort of not an either or, but somewhere in the middle where you say, if we don't have it, how are we making sure that these voices show up? So do you have to add a whole stage of consultation? Do you have to have something in your decision matrix to say, before we ever go live in this way with this decision, one of our commitments will be, if we don't have this perspective represented, we will go get it. Like, I wonder how you do it if you can't have everyone on your team.
Yeah. And then if you can get it that way, then why can't you just hire white people and then do focus groups with Black community?
Yeah.
I think what we're looking for is somebody like the vice president. Mm-hmm. She didn't get the job because she represents a minority point of view or even a female point. She got the job. She's really good at what she does. She's an incredibly competent person who, in addition to that, also represents a point of view that the rest of the United States Congress does not have, because they're all just, old white guys ready to go to a senior's home.
Why did that feel like a baby microaggression?
Okay, tell me why. Tell me why.
I don't know.
Because
I was feeling
I didn't want to do this.
I felt like it was like going to that place of she speaks so well.
Yeah, it does sound like that,
right?
Doesn't it?
Like, what did you expect? She's the damn vice president of the United States. Would you think she just... Ta-da? Like, how do you, as you're going, I'm like, wait, are we going down the path of, I was really surprised?
Yeah. No. I mean, I was really impressed. I don't think I was surprised. But, okay, so this is for all of our listeners right now who might be either absolutely confused and think, they're making a big deal out of something. I got to go rewind it because I don't know what I missed. And then the rest who are thinking, oh my gosh, we need to cancel this podcast. And everybody in between.
Chris.
This is the point of this. This is the point of the public bumbling.
Right.
This is, I come here to intentionally figure out how to get fit. I'm trying to move from unconsciously incompetent to some conscious incompetence, at least. I want to know what I don't know. So this is that moment. Let's dive in. Me saying, look, she's an incredibly competent person. Of course she has a job, and she represents a point of view that is severely underrepresented among people who are writing laws for everybody. Somehow that felt like a microaggression. Is there a way to say it better? Or do you just like what I would do on my own? If I was listening to this podcast, Jake, I'd say, mental note, never talk about the vice president and her abilities. Ever, ever. Just avoid it, because it's a landmine. There's no way around it. You're going to die.
Yeah, I mean, I think those, I mean, just to catch folks up, if microaggression is a new term, these are those insidious things that often don't have any malice behind, but these are in the experience of the person who's on the receiving end. You hear them all the time. So
could we do some examples?
Yeah,
hey, where are you from?
Could be where you're from, or you speak so well.
Oh yeah.
You're Jake McIsaac.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to expect. You don't look like a Jake McIsaac. I get that one a lot.
Did we already tell this story about the golf club house?
No.
So Jake and I are Jake. This is a long time ago. Jake and I are at a golf event. We don't golf.
I think we were there to try and solicit donations.
Yeah. Was it reverse day?
No, it wasn't reverse day, but I think we were felt like we were undercover with rich people. And
yeah.
We were like, what do you wear? Should we? Okay, we're going to do what? We're going to walk around for 4 hours? Okay.
There's a cart? Yeah. Okay, I'll drive a cart. So we're sitting around at the clubhouse. This was 20 years ago. Sitting around, and we're having polite conversation. And this guy, he says...
remember, before he says that,
yeah,
he's asking me about getting the coat. We're standing by the door.
Oh, I totally forgot this.
He's looking at me, and he's asking about where's the coat room. I'm like, I don't know. He asked me another question, and it dawns on me that...
He thinks you work there.
I don't work here. Oh, and then this is where this comes up.
Then he says, we make introductions like polite people. My name's Chris Jarvis. And you say,
oh, I'm Jake McIsaac, and we're from this organization. And he says,
oh, you must be from the Black McIsaacs. To which Jake and I both did a side glance and thought, that's a thing? There's a group out there? Is that a well-known...
Yeah, we had to go and look that up later. What? The Black McIsaacs?
I think the drive home, we rehearsed that little scene and laughed our heads off. So, but that's a microaggression, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think as ridiculous as that was,
yeah,
I think in that moment he just had to fill the air with something.
Yeah. How do I make this up somehow? Because obviously
he just was trying to get out of it, but. I mean, that's something that I've had my whole life with this name. It's one of those things that would be a microaggression. These microaggressions, these things that people often encounter over and over.
Yeah. I think the worst part about it is you could write somebody off as being cruel, unkind, whatever, if they just said, I don't like you because you're Black or you're not, you don't belong here. You could say, oh, okay, you're a monster or whatever. But these kind of tiny little things, where are you from? Well, I'm from Halifax. Yeah, where are your people from? I don't know. Where did you pick us up?
As if there's a right answer that will suddenly allow me to belong here.
So going back to why we felt like we had a missing piece, and we have several missing pieces on our team. And as we grow, we've got a bunch of missing pieces in terms of competencies, abilities, experiences, points of view, and it all goes together in some mixture. And this blog that you can read on the Realize Worth website is sort of our attempt as an open letter to say, we're trying to figure this out, and it is not because of your skin tone, but we are intentionally trying to undo something that nobody really had to think about very hard before, because you just hire the guys at the front of the line. And I do mean guys at the front of the line because it was almost always white men.
But isn't this like a reaction to this is reverse racism? Like, isn't...
Okay, so for everybody, yeah, that's a really good point. There literally is no such thing as reverse racism. It is impossible. By virtue of one characteristic, you can't have the other characteristic. So there's no reverse racism. Having said that, what people mean by that is you're acting against me because I have privilege.
Or this doesn't feel fair.
Yes.
This doesn't feel fair. This is reverse racism. I think that's
this doesn't feel fair. That is definitely, yeah.
This doesn't feel fair. This
the core feeling there.
And this disrupts my natural sense of justice, that I deserve this, I should get this, now something is being withheld from me, and I have all the markers that would entitle me to get this.
I did what people told me to do to get here. Yeah, and you're telling me, oh, yeah, you have the wrong color skin.
Right,
that's not
fair.
That's
what they're hearing. That's what they
hear, yeah.
But if everything were equal, that might be interesting, right? Because there is a structural, a power element in racism.
Mm-hmm.
It can't be because there's other groups don't share the power. So I might not like you, but I actually can't withhold a job from you. The systems aren't designed to hold you down and hold you back and work against you. So I might not like you because of the color of your skin. I might even say awful and hateful and discriminatory things about you. But my ability to actually impact you and hold you and be a barrier to you in the world, in how you navigate the world, in the systems that you come up against, it just doesn't happen. So it can't be reverse racism.
It does happen with minority groups.
Right. This is why
right.
It's not a fair comparison.
Right.
But it feels the same.
It feels the same. Yeah. Especially during this era where the number of diversity, equity, inclusion jobs on LinkedIn is blowing up, and the market is course correcting for the overcorrection for the past 300 years in the United States, and is trying to course correct somewhat to say we are underrepresented in this point of view. Yes, there are a number of people who may have the right experience and status. That's not what we're hiring for. We're hiring as a collective to round out what we're doing here as a group. So it's not even about the individual sometimes, but it also feels unfair.
Yeah. I can see where people struggle with it, especially in intersectional ways. If it feels like, man, maybe people do say this overtly, you didn't get the job because you're not who we were looking for. That feels like it's about the person. Right? So for all of our conversation about belonging, that has got to land in a way that puts people in a space where they feel like an outsider. Even if it's only temporary, even if it's momentary, like it feels awful. The core of who I am has been rejected.
Yep.
And there's nothing I can do about that. That is a bit of a harder pill to swallow than, I'm sorry, we were looking for a master's degree and you didn't have it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I figured
you
I
can
had
do something
a
with that.
combination of experience, and I knew I didn't have it, but I thought I'd put in here, and got to shoot your shot. But thank you for the opportunity. Thanks for the interview.
Yeah.
I've certainly gone out for jobs that I didn't qualify for. I got to the interview table, and they got the feedback that said, you know what, we were thinking of going in a different direction. You didn't quite get it here, but we were really interested and had a great. I can accept that. It's really hard. I don't love it, but I can accept it.
It fits
it
the
makes
model
sense to me.
of merit and of qualifications, and it feels objective, and I can see why you went the different way. The other one is about who I am. I didn't choose to be who I am. That feels unfair.
Right.
I didn't.
No matter who gets that.
No matter
answer.
who. Yeah, exactly. It
hurts. If we were
does.
going to get to a human level, it hurts. And what hurt people do next matters a lot. It matters if they have power.
Yeah.
Do they hurt other people? Where do they go with that? If they're hurt, do they retreat from putting themselves out there again?
Yeah.
Do they shut down?
Yeah. Do they start a podcast?
Right. A couple hurt people. What is it? Two beggars telling other beggars where to find bread.
Where to find bread. Yeah. I like that.
But this is. I do think about it. I don't want to just take one position that says even though we've talked about white fragility and we've talked about why we have to have tough conversations in the workplace, that doesn't mean that tough conversations still don't land in human ways that feel painful and require people to process. And I think it's very courageous. I think it's that next level that Angela's going out to say, let's be transparent about it. Let's be transparent about our decision making, because I think hopefully it's not a Band-Aid, but it's the way that healing can start for a person who has to process that and go away and think about it when they're ready.
And if you step back from it just a little bit, from the one-on-one, I have a ton of empathy for the person who's hurt because they didn't make the cut for whatever reason, especially when it feels like it's an unfair reason like this. We've all been there.
Yes.
And I do feel empathy for that. But if you step back just one step, you'll realize we've been hurting people with our hiring practices based on this meritocracy and this American exceptionalism thing that's ingrained in the systemic racism. Generationally, we've been not only hurting people's feelings, but crushing generations and locking them into poverty.
Right.
And that is worth the individual hurt that all of us, that the hurt that I felt after I was called out on a call for a microaggression with my own team. I felt very hurt and embarrassed and ashamed. But for the sake of who we're becoming as a species, and in the name of everybody else who's been crushed with a life of microaggressions, I can get through my feelings being hurt on that time and learn from it and move forward.
But I think that's everything that you just said. I think we have to remember, if we take that human-centered lens, that as strategic as we want to be about our priorities and as intentional about the commitments and around equitable and inclusive workspaces, we're still dealing with human beings. We still have to also understand that individuals have another journey and we need to be attentive to it. And that's why I think that, and if we're creating space for a both and is really, really a thoughtful place for a company to be, to say, you could just lie and say you didn't qualify and just make something up.
Yeah.
But there's a harder conversation that's worth having that will give people, an opportunity to show up in different ways if they can hear it. I think that's awesome.
I actually was going to work in that blind bit from the orchestras that they did in the 1950s. Orchestras were mostly white men, and when they asked conductors, why do you pick men, it's mostly men, it was because they play better. We listened to them and they just play better. And then they just close the curtains and they audition that way. And the majority of people selected were women. They're like, well, what the hell? So that changed how orchestras hired people for orchestras. Until then, it was almost always men. Because you couldn't tell, your bias was active while you were listening. And I wanted to bring it into this conversation because I was thinking, we're hyper concerned that even in the evaluation when we're trying to be objective, we've got an open current, oh, they're a woman, so the bias is active, and we're just not able to see it, obviously.
But I think you're right. There's bias in hiring practices. There's biases in what you're looking for in a resume. So as much as I kind of joke about the microaggressions of you're Jake McIsaac, that name privilege has helped me too in the other way.
Yeah. That's very
I'm sure it has. So you have lots of places that have like a process where someone reads it and takes the names out, but they're not a decision maker, and then they pass it along to a decision maker and they're all numbered. I'm not sure that that's it either, because that feels like I don't see color.
Yeah.
So that's like the HR version of I don't see color.
Yeah.
But it's a starting place. It's a commitment. I think not having the answer to this is okay, because this is actually all about the journey, the struggle, the sustained commitment to keep this front of mind.
Yeah, Thomas Kuhn in his Scientific Revolutions, a book I love, that basically talks about how we progress between epochs within science, from Newtonian science to Einstein science. It says two things have to happen. One, you have to be okay with your lab work always failing. Like, that didn't work. And then you have to be okay with asking questions where everybody else has already got it figured out. Like everybody thought the factor here is ether, blah, 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 blah. There's no such thing. But until somebody said, wait, I know everybody thinks there's the ether.
Why do we just accept that?
But why do we accept it?
Yeah.
Are you insane? Why are you, that's been figured out, blah, blah. So I like where you ended up, but we have to be okay with having a blank page and saying, okay, we don't know the answer, and we have to come up with a new kind of question because we don't want to get the same answers again.
Yeah.
This podcast is brought to you by the RW Institute, produced by Daniel Parker, recorded remotely in Los Angeles from Baltimore, Maryland, and Halifax, Nova Scotia. Be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with the conversation. Care to react? Submit your comments at rw.institute or on the comment feature where you're listening now.